Before you start, I understand that the transcriber has COVID, but feels well enough to transcribe from home. That's correct, is it?
And I think so, yes.
Yeah. So in those circumstances, I think we ought to try and stick fairly rigidly to having a break after about an hour.
Yes.
But I also understand, just for everyone to know, that if we proceed in that way with having more but shorter breaks, it may be that we won't need a long lunch break today and that we'll finish around about 1:30. That's not a promise to anyone, but that's apparently how we might proceed. So I'm just letting everyone know.
I'm grateful.
Over to you, Mr. Seaman.
Thank you, sir. Can I call Ms. Allaker?
I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Allaker. As you know, my name is Sam Stevens, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please, could you state your full name?
Full name is Elizabeth Ann Allaker.
Thank you for attending the inquiry today to give evidence, and thank you also for providing a written statement, to which I would like to turn now.
Okay.
It should be in the bundle of documents in front of you under tab A. For the record, the reference is WITN 062000100. And does that statement run to 8 pages?
It does, yes.
And on page 6, the last paragraph should be paragraph 50.
Yeah,
And at the bottom should be a signature. Is that your signature?
it is, yes.
And are the contents of that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
That statement now stands as evidence in the inquiry. I will be asking you some questions on that and other matters as well.
Okay.
Firstly, in terms of background, you held various roles with the Post Office from 1979 to 2001, including as a counter clerk and an auditor.
Yes.
I think you were an auditor in, is it 1998?
It was thereabouts, yes. I can't remember the exact date, but I think I'd put what I thought it was in here.
And were you an auditor prior to the introduction of Horizon?
Yes.
Can you recall at that team where the audit team sat in the Post Office? What department?
Do you mean whereabouts in the country or in...
No, in
which...
sort of corporate structure.
I can't actually, no.
And in general terms, as an auditor, when would you be asked to investigate a sub-post office?
Well, the audit process was routine anyway, so you tried to get round as many offices as you could within whatever the time scales were. On top of that, if they thought there was a risk to funds, if something had flagged up anywhere that suggested there might be a risk of funds being lost, then we were asked to attend. Also for robberies and burglaries, following a robbery or a burglary, there was an audit done of the office to see what any...
Sorry, Ms. Allaker, could we pause there? Mm-hmm. There's a problem with the transcript, I believe, sir. Sorry.
A problem in the sense of it not appearing on our screens here, or a problem with the transcriber?
I'm just going to check now, sir. It'll just be a moment. Right.
Yeah.
I understand. So, thank you.
It seems to be general consensus it's working now, yeah?
Right. But it's being, I understand it's being transcribed. It's simply not...
It's being transcribed because I've got it on the live on my own computer. It's
right.
Not showing on the... It's showing on the screens, but it's stopped. It's frozen on the inquiry screens.
Well, I think I've said this on an earlier occasion. if the problem is simply with our screens here, but there is a transcription occurring, I propose to carry on because we can all read the transcription afterwards.
Yes, I'm grateful, sir. I'm told that we can refresh the screens in about 5 minutes, so it should be back on within that period.
All right, fine.
Thank you. Ms. Allaker, I apologise for that.
Okay.
You were just talking about burglaries, I believe, when asked to pause. Could you continue your answer?
Yes. So there would, if there was a robbery or burglary, the audit team were asked to attend to assess what shortfall there was following the robbery or burglary. There would also be audits done if an office was transferring from one sub-postmaster to another. I think that's probably it. Oh, if the office was being defunded for any reason, perhaps if there'd been, I don't know, what's an example, a flood or a fire or something like that, then at that point, often the audit team would be asked to attend then and make sure everything was packed up and checked off before it was defunded, or the stock was taken out in cash.
So when you said funds at risk earlier, would that
Yeah.
include if there was a discrepancy between discrepancy in the count?
Yes, that it's if something had flagged up somewhere to suggest there was a discrepancy, yeah.
And in practical terms, as a matter of practice, what level of discrepancy would it take to trigger an audit like that?
I don't know. I don't know whether there would be any particular level. I mean, you'd have probably things would have been checked first to make sure that there was no transaction corrections or anything due, or there hadn't been anything else wrong. It wouldn't always need to have been a lot. You know, I'm not talking tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or anything like that. It could have just been a few hundred or into the thousands. It didn't have to be an awful lot of money. It was just the fact that there was a discrepancy there that nobody was getting to the bottom of.
Pausing there, I want to pause on this issue of shortfalls.
Mm-hmm.
The Post Office contracted with Subpostmasters from 1994 on the standard Subpostmaster contract.
Yeah.
That was modified on occasion. There were then new terms brought in 2011, the network transformation contract. The questions I'm going to ask now concern the earlier contract, the standard Subpostmaster contract. Before I come to that, the inquiry has heard evidence that the Post Office worked on the basis that Subpostmasters were required to make good any shortfall that arose in the branch accounts.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And was that always the case during your time at the Post Office?
Yes.
And where did your basis for that position come from?
It was always explained that it was because it was a contract for services. Then you always referred back to the contract, and that was quite clearly written in the contract that any loss, whether it was loss by the sub-postmaster or their assistants, was to be made good by the sub-postmaster. That was the contract that they'd signed, so that was the basis that we worked to.
If we could bring that contract up, it's POL 0000254 and page 33, please. Clause 12 deals with losses, and it says that the sub-postmaster is responsible for all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness or error, and also for all losses caused by the negligence, carelessness or error of his or her assistants. Deficiencies due to such losses must be made good without delay. reading that, would you accept that what a subpostmaster is responsible for here is a loss where it's caused by their own negligence, carelessness, or error?
Yes.
And that's, do you accept that's different from a subpostmaster being responsible for any loss, howsoever caused?
I can't think of any other kind of loss that could be caused.
Well, if you take in Horizon the example of a discrepancy caused by the computer system itself,
Right, yeah.
would you accept that that wouldn't be caused by negligence, carelessness, or error of the subpostmaster?
Yes.
So that can be taken down, thank you. The message and the position that Post Office considered subpostmasters would be responsible for, subpostmasters would be responsible for all losses. You said that came back to the contract, but was there anyone in management who was reiterating that position as that was Post Office's position?
Not necessarily. I mean, because that was the contract. I think probably what I should say here is that while I worked for the Post Office, whichever role I was doing, that's the only clause that I remember. And at that point, I don't think I or anyone else had any reason to believe that there could be any other way that a loss was caused. So the fact that that the Horizon system could cause a loss, it just wasn't even considered.
Moving on, after your counter clerk roles, you took a role in 2001. Could you briefly summarise what that was?
2001.
Sorry, it's for your reference. It's paragraph 4 of your statement. You say,
Within Darlington area office.
Yes.
Yeah, that was an administration role. So it was pretty much administrating for, there was an area manager and I can't remember what all the job titles were at that point, but there were a number of people that worked from that office. So it was booking appointments, answering inquiries, that kind of thing.
and in 2012 you became a contract advisor.
Yeah.
What did that role involve?
That involved managing contractual inquiries. It could have involved interviewing subpostmasters.
What would you have interviewed them about?
Well, if there'd been a discrepancy at audit for which they'd been precautionarily suspended, that I could have interviewed them for that. It could have been in touch with them about sickness, if they needed holiday substitution, that kind of inquiries that used to come through.
So on the interviews in respect of maybe interviews in respect of discrepancies.
Yeah.
You said earlier that you during this period considered that Horizon couldn't cause discrepancies.
Yeah.
Was that a general view held by contract advisors to the best of your knowledge?
It would have been, yes, because my assumption, and I presume everybody else's, was that although things didn't always run smoothly in Horizon, there was always some way of recovering or fallbacks to make sure that anything that had gone wrong was put right. So, yes, I would imagine that would be the case without speaking for everybody else, but yes.
As a contract advisor, were you ever, did you ever encounter a subpostmaster saying, this discrepancy, I believe it's been caused by the Horizon IT system?
No, not directly, and certainly not during the period that I was a contract advisor. Later, down the line, then yes, there did start to be people who questioned that if they did have a loss, not to me directly, but I had heard of that being asked, yes.
If, as a contract advisor, someone had said that to you directly, what would your response have been?
I probably would have done my best to, try and make them understand that it wasn't possible, that, that whatever had gone wrong, would investigate it, and there was no way that it could be the Horizon system because of all the assurances that we got.
When you say all the assurances you got, could you just expand on that, please?
Well, we've always been of the impression that anything that did go wrong with Horizon, that somewhere in the background it was put right. If it had got to the point where a branch had a loss, they would receive a transaction correction for it, or if a branch had a loss that they couldn't explain, there was an option to put it into the suspense account sometimes to see if a transaction correction came back later down the line. But any investigation had never, or any, looking into losses had never thrown up anything to do with the Horizon system having caused the loss. So I presume that, we just all trusted what we were told, and that a loss couldn't be caused by the system itself.
Who gave you those assurances?
I don't know whether it was just generally everybody said the same thing. I don't know that we necessarily even looked to anybody for assurance. It was just that if that came up ever, that's what we knew, that it must have been mentioned at some point, but I cannot honestly point to one person and say they did.
As a contract advisor, were you involved in intervention visits?
Going out to a branch myself at that point, no, I don't think I was. I was involved in intervention visits prior to that, I think. Possibly during my time in the area office. I think I would be asked to help out and go out and visit a branch for, it could have been a robbery or burglary or...
Did you ever go out for an intervention visit because a Subpostmaster was requesting additional training?
No.
Did you attend an intervention visit to investigate the cause of a discrepancy?
Not, I don't think, during my time as a contract advisor. Only during my time at audit, in the audit team, I think.
So 1998, pre-Horizon.
Yeah.
I want to move on in the chronology to October 2013.
Yeah.
Please, could we bring up POL 000-43370? This is an attendance note for a meeting on the 9th of October 2013. It's on Bond Dickinson headed paper. Are you aware of Bond Dickinson's role in relation to the post office?
Yes.
And that is?
Bond Dickinson were like legal representation for the post office.
We see in the attendance list there are legal, Roderick Williams. That was head of Post Office Legal, was it, at that point? Martin Smith of Cartwright King. Do you recall his role?
I don't recall his role, no.
We see at Network you were in attendance,
Yeah.
and Gayle Peacock as well,
Yeah.
Nick Beale. And for the NBSC, it says that you're there on behalf of Kendra Dickinson.
Yeah.
At this stage in 2013, were you involved with the NBSC?
Yes, I used to work quite closely with the NBSC to try and make improvements to the way the structure was, and to make improvements to I can't remember at that point whether the branch support team was still there, but I sort of linked between the two of the teams. The branch support team, if they were still there, then were still part of the network teams.
We'll come on to that in a moment, but
Yeah.
in broad terms, yes, involved,
Yes.
but as a sort of oversight, what could be improved rather than taking calls yourself.
Yes.
If we could just go down on this attendance note to see, it refers to a number of issues and branches, which I don't need to go into detail, but my question is, what was the purpose of this meeting?
I think, would this be one of the meetings that were held, don't know whether it was monthly, to try and just make sure that anything that was coming in on that was reference to the Horizon system, or any losses or anything like that that didn't overlap with anything that was going on with the inquiry. Had the inquiry started by this point?
Not at this stage. There was a second site. This is around the time when the second site was.
So it would be to make sure that that's probably what I'm thinking of then, that we didn't overlap with any of the cases that were going on in second site, and that also we were starting to take any learnings from cases that came up to make sure that if there was things falling through the net anywhere, that we were more likely to pick them up, whether it was to do with Horizon or looking at this. Some of it was more general things anyway.
So these were operational issues, discrepancies and the like, which were being discussed in a context with legal representatives of post offices.
Yes.
And do you recall what sort of issues the legal team were interested in?
Not in detail, no. I mean, if I hadn't had the documents, I would probably have struggled to remember most of the things that were discussed. But looking at some of this, then there was certainly things that people were starting to say had linked to Horizon then. But no, not specifics of anything, no.
Slightly different question. Do you recall if the legal team gave any advice on operational issues, such as what to do with the loss?
Not that I remember. I think their advice was more legally based. But that's just memory I'm picking up there.
If we can go to a different document, please. It's POL 00002276. This is, at the top, it says Horizon Service Improvements Workshop, and it's the 5th of September 2013, so a month before, but around the same time as the legal meeting we just saw. Do you recall the purpose of this meeting?
Yeah, vaguely. I think this meeting was set up because by this point we were starting to get input from, well, the NFSP had mentioned improvements for a number of years. And I can't remember whether we also had the branch user forum set up then, which was a little small group of Subpostmasters who used to attend a meeting quarterly who would set that little group up to try and get more input from sub-postmasters. They used to go and talk to their own representatives. So I think the NFSP, the Branch User Forum, and possibly other sources were all saying that there was improvements that they would like to see. And this workshop was to try and kick off some of that with Fujitsu. It was at Bracknell, wasn't it? Yeah. So it was to try and get them to understand, from the sub-postmaster's point of view, what improvements they wanted going forward.
We see there's in the attendee list NFSP, Jim Knott,
Yeah.
postmaster.
Yeah.
Do you recall how that postmaster was selected?
No, if my memory is correct, there was more than him actually due to attend. But for whatever reason on the day, Jim was the only one that did attend. I don't know whether there'd been another meeting come up or what had happened, but I'm pretty sure that there were other people that were asked on behalf of the NFSP, and Jim was the only one that could make it.
And you've mentioned about the NFSP and there being calls for improvements for a while. Can you recall if there was an immediate trigger which caused this meeting to be arranged?
Not to my knowledge, not an immediate trigger.
Please can we turn to page 4 and section 1.5. This talks about rem out for end-of-day check processing. Could you just explain very simply what that is?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you used to have to rem your checks out, and a lot of that depended on when your collection was from Royal Mail, because they used to have to be dispatched manually. So you used to have to cut them off and rem them out then. And then I don't know whether on a balancing day, or was it every day or just on a balancing day? Testing my own memory now. They used to have to be remmed out again, or something had to be done definitely at balancing. I think the reason that one was on the list for looking at improvements was because it was a bit of a clunky process. So there seemed to be a number of steps that you could go through, and it wasn't always intuitive, particularly, I suppose, if you were a new sub-postmaster. So I think it was there to look at seeing if it could be done any slicker through the system.
If we just turn the page, if we can, to the top of the next page, please. So it says, this is a lengthy process and unnecessarily runs the report twice. Mm-hmm. It also increases the potential for the clerk to enter an amount which does not match the report total amount. So is what this is saying is that the process increased the risk of discrepancy caused by user error?
Yes, it could. Because anywhere that you could just put a number in yourself, there's always the chance that you're going to hit a wrong key, or something else could go wrong.
If we go down slightly, we see there are some suggested improvements. Do you recall if those were brought in?
I can't actually know. I know that we did some more work on that, on the check rem out process, but I can't remember, honestly, whether improvements did actually come in or not.
So things like this, where improvements to make the system easier to use and potentially reduce error, were those findings of where there may be increased risk of user error, were they communicated to anyone in the audit team or the prosecutorial team?
Not communicated to, but I would say that the people in the audit team all knew of the processes that were a bit clunky, really, that, you know, where it was likely that an error could be, so let's look there first to make sure that there's not anything wrong. So the check rem out system would be one of the ones that they would look at. They would always look at things like that to make sure that checks had been remmed out, that they'd been remmed out correctly, etc., etc.
So in effect, is your evidence that where there were, let's call it design issues which increase the risk of a user error, the audit team would be well aware of that?
I would say so, yes.
Can we turn to page 6, please, and paragraph 2.4? Excuse me. This relates to transaction correction printouts. And it says the postmaster needs to be able to see which transaction corrections have been processed and which are outstanding. If we can turn the page, the suggested improvement in this case is that that report is already available, and so this improvement is considered to already be present. It goes on to discuss revisiting communications on this. And at this stage, were you aware of any sub-postmasters who were calling for more access to, say, audit data or transaction data used by the Horizon IT system?
To answer that question, I'd probably have to say that yes, there was always a desire that I'd found from the sub-postmasters that I spoke to, that they had improved ways of looking at the system themselves. So whether it was to do with transaction corrections. And I don't know, when it says is considered to be already present, I'm not disputing that opportunity may have been there, but then clearly in this case what we needed to do was recommunicate that here's a report that you can get. A lot of sub-postmasters would want as much information as possible, so would have been asking for, you know, it would be asking if they could get a report on X, Y, and Z. So, yes.
And do you know if that was ever a point of discussion with Fujitsu as to whether that would be a possibility of allowing postmasters access to such data?
It was, because I think I've been there when those conversations were had. As a result of this, and then also doing some work on what we ended up calling Horus, which was a tool to investigate certain transactions and reports and things. Ultimately, the desire for Horus would have been for sub-postmasters to have access to that type of reporting. And I think at the time, not long before I left, these things were being discussed more often because we were hoping for new technology to be coming in, or new systems to be coming in, so that we could get sub-postmasters access to more information, and it would be more of a two-way thing. Ultimately, what we wanted was for sub-postmasters to be able to communicate with us online. And I got the impression that that's what sub-postmasters wanted to do as well. And once we'd got to that sort of state, we were hoping that we would be able to share some of the things that we were starting to build ourselves.
I was going to come to Horus later, but it makes sense that you've mentioned it now, go there. Horus is HORICE. And was that an acronym for something?
It was, but I can't remember what it was. That's the next question.
In paragraph 5 of your statement, you say that you worked on building an inquiry system known as Horus, which was to build new reports to try and improve the way information could be obtained from the system to handle inquiries. Presumably the system there is Horizon.
Yes.
Do you recall when Horus was introduced?
No, I can't. I can't put a date on it.
In broad terms, would it have been earlier or later than, say, 2013?
Later, I think.
And what information was available or stored in Horus?
It was all transactional data and report data, but it was what we were trying to do was get reports for things that we hadn't already had, and I can't remember it. I can't even tell you what an example would be of a one. Just so that if there was a discrepancy, or you needed to look for something, or you needed to find something more quickly, then you could get a report from this new Horus system that we'd got.
So would that include the transaction logs for a particular branch?
Well, you could get transaction logs anyway. So Subpostmasters did have access to printing off transaction logs, if I remember correctly, but only for a certain length of time. And I think that's one of the things that we were wanting to change. I don't know that that was directly within Horus, but it was certainly Horus was asking for stuff to be available for a longer period of time, so that you did have something that you could go back and refer to.
What length of time are we talking here?
I think Horus was only, the transaction logs were only available in branch, I'm going to say for a month. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. If that's the case, I think we were asking for 6 months and possibly even longer than that. Having said that, I think there was going to be a limit to what we could get because of the volume of transactions that went through the system. I don't know that whatever clouds these things all go to were going to be big enough to hold everything for that length of time.
And we spoke about transaction logs. Would Horus store things beyond that? So would it include actually just the data in a branch that Horizon used to generate branch accounts?
I don't know. I think what I would say here is that information was there somewhere, the information that we were asking for in post office. So whether it was for the Finance Service Centre, whether it was something that was going to help Subpostmasters themselves, whether it was the security team or whoever that was suggesting the types of reports that we were asking to be implemented in Horus, that information was clearly there. Otherwise, Fujitsu would have said, no, we can't do that because we haven't got that type of information stored. So we're asking for stuff that was there, just either in a better format for a longer period of time or in a different way to allow us to look at our own system.
For easier access?
Yes.
And who was given permission to access Horus?
There were only, I think at the time that I left, there were only about 18 licenses, if it was that. There was a very small number of licenses because I think it was still being trialled.
And what was the reason for not giving access for Subpostmasters to the data relevant to their own branch through Horus?
I don't know. I know that we only had a very small number of licenses at that time. Ultimately, discussions were ongoing with Fujitsu to either extend the number of licenses or to progress the trial further. But then it was going to be, I think it was cost after that. So it would be, we'll have to start talking about money for additional licenses and how many do you need.
And moving on from Horus, then we'll go to the branch support program, which I believe you were involved with.
Yes.
What was your role in that?
I'd probably have been doing a number of jobs within the branch support program. I did used to facilitate the branch user forum. I can't remember any specifics. It was, God, we did an awful lot of stuff. It was a lot about trying to work with the communication team, work with different parts of the business to try and get, improvements to what we were doing and how we were communicating, so that it was easier for sub-postmasters. Just working throughout the business.
Let's take it in stages. Do you remember when this program started?
Can't remember exactly the date that it started. And because programs tended to change names, we did like to have a change of name every now and then. And I can't remember which program ran into which one now, so sorry.
If I suggested around 2013 or 14, would that ring true?
I wouldn't be able to argue one way or another, so.
And you refer to the branch user forum. I understand that is where sub-postmasters were invited to provide feedback on the Horizon system and post office processes generally.
Yeah.
How many sub-postmasters were involved?
In the branch user forum?
Yes.
It was about 6 sub-postmasters, I think.
And how were they selected?
I think it was through the branch focus, the communications team. There was an article went out in that inviting people to apply. And then from the applications, somebody, I don't know who or how, selected the people that would first come in on the branch user forum. But I think it was an annual changeover, so the plan was that it was going to be changed annually, and it was, people came out and went in. So you weren't there indefinitely.
Please can we turn to POL 3039215? So this is a branch support program PowerPoint presentation in May 2014. Are you aware of a mediation scheme for sub-postmasters who are alleged to have shortfalls caused by Horizon?
I'm aware of it, yes.
Were you involved in it?
No.
Was there any link between the branch support program and either Second Sight or that mediation scheme?
Link would be, well, people? I don't know. I don't know whether there was any direct link between the people that worked in the branch support program and the mediation scheme. There would, I knew certainly the people that worked in the mediation scheme. Whether or not they were all part of the branch support program at the same time, or we were all under this same umbrella, I wouldn't be able to say.
Do you know what triggered the branch support program to be implemented?
I think it was probably the ongoing need to have some sort of, I would say, a culture change within post office. I think it was more or less along the lines that we weren't engaging with people as well as we could. It didn't feel like at the time that everybody's voice could be heard. And the branch support program was probably grown out of that.
If we turn to page 3, please. Sorry, page 5. No, it was in between page 4, sorry. This refers to, it says one of the issues of the report, which is referring to the interim report of second side, says it says the following: lack of timely, accurate and complete information provided to Subpostmasters to support them in resolving issues, and lack of centralised data or files specific to each branch, which hinders a quality investigation from taking place. And we, at the bottom, we see the investigation undertaken by the programme highlighted confirmed the following issues. Inconsistent record keeping by internal teams or contact made with branches, inconsistent quality of information retained by teams, lack of consistent processes or workflows between teams within a process, lack of timescales to resolve branch issues, coupled with the lack of monitoring of issues, inconsistent sense of ownership of different issues. From this, is it fair to say that the branch support programme wasn't engaging with Subpostmasters on alleged bugs, errors and defects in the Horizon IT system?
I think I would say that it's probably fair to say that no, we weren't, because bugs, errors and defects were more IT issues. If we'd needed to do anything about that, and I'm not saying that we didn't, because, you know, certainly things did occasionally crop up that were described to me as bugs, errors and defects. That would have been more in Fujitsu's domain.
Right, so outside of your responsibility?
Yes, in that it's not something that we would have been able to fix, but I suppose as part of working on Horus and working on the branch support programme, I think it's probably fair to say that looking to the future, what we would want is a system with bug, error and defect free, of course, but that's probably not possible in IT world. So while it wasn't there on that list, if you like, it would be something in the back of our minds.
But I suppose more in terms of the branch user forum, which this was involved with, the Subpostmasters there was no discussion with Subpostmasters of bugs, errors and defects in the context of the branch user forum.
Not that I recall directly, no.
And were you involved in any steps to be taken to address the issues that you identify in this slide? Well, in that, yes, there were a number of things that we tried to do within the branch support programme through either NBSC and branch support team, if they were still around at the time, that would help engage more with Subpostmasters. So we did things like we could get reports from NBSC on the number of people that called in to NBSC, what the issues were they called in on. So like which branches called in most often, which branches didn't call in at all. And during the time that the branch support programme ran and afterwards, we used to make calls to branches from those lists to make sure that, you know, was there anything that we could do to help? So if it was somebody that was ringing in along a lot of the time, it was to try and make sure that if they were new Subpostmasters,
was there any additional help they needed? Was there any more support that we could get them? Whether that be through a bit more regular contact from an NBSC advisor, or, ultimately we could put a request through perhaps to get a bit more training. I think we had calls to branches that had never rung into us at all, so that, because clearly there was still a valuable part of the post office as far as we were concerned, but for years they hadn't been engaged with, if you like, so they were wrong.
Should we look at the MBSC now on that point? And
Yeah.
if we can turn to POL 30902223, which is an email that you sent to Angela van den Bogert on 6th of May 2015. And you say you attach a one-pager, but it's actually a two-sided one-pager on the MBSC employee comments, which we'll come to in a moment. It's feedback. Why were you providing this feedback to Angela van den Bogert at this stage?
I don't know. I think that with this one, all I'd done was pull the information together from my contact with NBSC, who I think that was where the McKinsey's feedback had been involved or was referring to. Because I didn't ever see the McKinsey's report myself, I'd just heard about it. So I'm guessing from this that all I'd done was pull something together and give it to Angela as a two-pager on something that she'd asked for.
Do you recall why she asked for it?
I can't, no.
Can we go to the next page, please? We have some comments here, and the first one, there's 81 comments in total, broken down as follows. Communication, 14 comments. Main theme relates to timely and better communications, and also knowledge of what to do when products are launched, or when things change or go wrong. This theme was raised with Branch Support Programme, and is a theme raised by BUF2. BUF being the
Branch User Forum, yeah.
So is it fair to say that the feedback you pulled together here was criticising the level of information and communication to the MBSC relating to both changes to Horizon and problems with Horizon?
Not necessarily with Horizon there, no. In fact, I would say probably not with Horizon. It was to do with communications that went out to branches in the branch focus. I think it was called branch focus, communication that went out weekly. NBSC should always have seen, well, I'm saying always, there may be things that they didn't need to see, but they should have always had the opportunity to see and comment on the communications that went out to branch before it went out, purely and simply because they were the ones that were going to get the inquiries if the communication wasn't clear. So they could then, act as the go-between between the communications team and Subpostmasters to some extent. And I think from memory, what that would be the advisors in NBSC would be saying we're either not getting them, or we're not getting them quick enough to do something about it, or maybe we've fed back on this but nobody's picked anything up or not replied to say why they haven't done anything with our feedback. So I think that would be more to do with products and transactions than anything to do with Horizon itself, with the system.
And the final sentence says AHT. Do you remember what that stands for?
Average handling time.
So is that the time in which it takes for a member of the team to resolve a call?
Yes.
So AHT was also raised as an issue by advisors in that they feel they are pressurised to achieve AHT above quality of response to branch. And do you recall that being a concern at the MBSC?
I recall it being mentioned, but I don't know that that's a fair comment because I don't know the context that it was given in.
Do you know what the average handle time aim was?
No. I'm saying no. I will have heard it in the past, but I can't remember what it was. And I would imagine that over years it probably changed anyway. You know, as average handling time, it would be if things were improved in NBSC, that if things were quicker for the advisors to get to, then I would imagine that over the years that average handling time would have changed.
So in your position, we see that the BUF and the Brand Support Programme looked at the MBSC. Did you have any concerns during that period as to the quality of the advice that the MBSC was able to give to Subpostmasters?
No.
Why not?
Because the advice that the NBSC gave to Subpostmasters was always given to them, so they had a massive knowledge base that they could go to look at. If the only thing I would say would have been a concern would have been if there were more than one way that they could get to the answer for something. So say somebody rang up about lottery for the sake of picking a, and the advisor hadn't understood exactly what the lottery question was and had gone into the wrong bit of the knowledge base, then that would have been the only thing that would have been a concern, not the actual it would be that they'd given the wrong bit of advice for the wrong transaction, for the right transaction, rather than I had any concern about the advice they were given. What was on the knowledge base was right, providing that the advisors went through it to the right bit.
Turning to a different topic now, at page 4 of your statement onwards, you refer to the Horizon weekly call. Do you remember when this was set up?
No.
Do you know why it was set up?
Yes, again, I think that was the one that was set up so that we weren't duplicating anything that was going on with the second site
What
branches.
do you mean duplicating?
Well, so if the branch was in second site, or later on whatever it went into was mediation, can't remember exactly what happened when. It was to make sure that we weren't then trying to do something with that branch that was already going on somewhere else, or if there was an ongoing enquiry, say, within the security team or within the finance service centre that, you know, they were already aware of, that we weren't then duplicating something that somebody else was already looking into.
And who attended those calls?
The Horizon Weekly call, it would be representatives from legal, network, or whatever we'll call then, finance service centre, Fujitsu, perhaps Fujitsu Atos by that point as well. Security, have I mentioned them?
Yes.
I can't remember off the top of my head whether there would be anybody else. But it was representatives from different parts of post office, Fujitsu or Atos, and legal.
And would this call be to lead to or lead to action points to be implemented in respect of how Subpostmasters' queries or discrepancies needed to be answered?
It could, I suppose, if something had cropped up that say if it had cropped up and it was an action point for me or whoever, and somebody else could then answer the question where I couldn't, then yes, it would be then used to go back and answer that Subpostmaster.
So that's probably a good time to take a break.
Certainly. 11:10.
Thank you, sir. Please, could I bring up POL 00002396 and go to page 2? We have an email from Andrew Morley it's to branch support team, but we see you pick up the email above, 11th of September 2014. And it refers to receiving a call from someone at the branch, and it says he has seen the BBC report concerning the system issues and is claiming that his system is corrupt. He wants all the money back from previous discrepancies which he has put in so he could balance. He has been to Horizon/Atos, who have checked everything and can find no system issues, but he is adamant it's a system issue. And above you say, this will be picked up by the contract advisor, not by an intervention visit. Stopping there, can I just ask why that was a contract advisor issue rather than an intervention at this point?
I'm guessing that once we'd looked at the branch file on the electronic filing cabinet, that it was something that the contract advisor was already in discussion with this particular Subpostmaster about. So again, to avoid duplicating work, or to avoid NBSC picking up something that they didn't need to, that it was correct for it to go to the contract advisor, the most recent request.
Do you recall seeing the BBC report that's referred to here?
In that I didn't watch it, no. I remember it was on, but I don't think I actually watched it.
Did you recall any discussion in the post office at that point on what that BBC report contained?
Well, yes, it wouldn't be fair to say that I didn't hear anything. But yes, there was a sort of general, what's going on here? Is, where's this coming from? Could any of this be right? But I think we were all still really assured that there was no issue that we need to be worried about.
Could we turn to WITN 063800101? The email at the bottom, please. It says from communications team to communications team, and it refers to media coverage on post office IT system on the same day as the previous email we went to. You may be aware of some media coverage about the post office Horizon system relating to the contents of some confidential documents, and this may prompt questions from postmasters you speak to. We are challenging the reporting of this matter as it implies we acknowledge there are systemic faults with Horizon. This is absolutely not the case. Although we will not comment on the contents of any confidential documents, after 2 years of investigation, it remains the case that there is absolutely no evidence of systemic issues with the computer system, which is used by over 78,000 people across our 11,500 branches, and which successfully processes over 6 million transactions every day. Do you recall receiving a communication like this?
Yeah.
And was this consistent with the type of messaging you were, or assurances you said you were receiving?
Yes.
And I think your evidence already is you were assured by these sorts of communications.
Yeah, I had absolutely no reason to doubt that, we were doing all the necessary due diligence ourselves, and that what we were being told was the case.
And do you think that was the same for your colleagues, that they
Yes.
were similarly assured by that?
Yes.
If you hadn't received these assurances, do you think that would have changed the way you approached Subpostmasters, such as the one we went to before, who were saying, I've got a problem, I think it's a system issue, look at this BBC report?
I think I would have probably thought a little bit more about it. But I still think that personally I was quite assured anyway, without being given the reassurance from the post office, if you like, because it was a general message that went out. I was quite trustful of the Horizon system anyway. So I don't know. Yes, I would never have doubted that anyone had concerns, and I would have done everything I could to alleviate them. But I certainly wouldn't have been saying, yes, I think there's something in what you're saying here, because I had no evidence to suggest that there was any.
Could we go to a different document, please? It's FUJ 001208885. And could we turn to page 3 of that document, please? Thank you. The email at the bottom is from Ian Humphreys. Do you recall who he was?
Yes.
Who was he?
He used to work in service management in Post Office Limited, and I think he went across to Atos.
He refers to the Meanwood branch has reported an issue with a health lottery transaction that is now preventing the terminal from connecting. Fujitsu is requesting for an authorization for them to remove the health lottery transaction, then the number, which is preventing successful recovery on counter node 04. So, at this point, what's your understanding of the problem facing this branch?
At this point, if I'd just been reading this, I'd have been wondering exactly what they were talking about. For me, there's not enough detail there to tell us exactly what's gone wrong. It might be quite clear to the person looking at it from the other end, I don't know. But I didn't really understand then what the implications of this was. So I didn't know whether it was having any effect on the branch account, I think, initially. I wouldn't have known whether or not the sub-postmaster knew anything about it, unless it was one of the ones that had been raised to me by the branch support team, in that they'd got a request through as well.
We see just towards the bottom, it says authorization is required urgently to enable the postmaster to get the node back online. So in effect, is the branch support team being asked to authorize a deletion of a transaction from the branch accounts?
They're being asked to go to an area manager, who I don't know who they would mean by an area manager at that point, but they're clearly being asked to, or somebody's being asked to get something authorised to get the node back online. That's I presume, the counter terminal. So I'm guessing that this would mean that the terminal, that counter position, they wouldn't be able to use because of whatever the problem was.
if you look at your response at page 2, please. It's at the bottom. You ask for someone to provide you with the process that was followed for this type of inquiry prior to service integration.
Right.
What was service integration here?
This must have been when service management transferred over their work to Atos. So, for example, Ian and Sharon, there's another name I remember, Rebecca Barker, they all worked in service management, but I think they all went across to Atos when service integration came in.
So those people who dealt with the authorization before that, they were then to be transferred out. And is your query now who deals with the authorization?
Yes, but whether or not they had actually dealt with the authorization before they tuppied across, I don't know. I just was hoping that they would have a process somewhere that would tell me where that's at, because if I'm right, I don't believe that NBSC or branch support team or anybody had a process for sorting out how we would get this back online.
If we can go to the next page, please, just to finish off. So it's UCSA and who the escalation points were. This type of request has not formally been managed by the branch support team, and if it needs to be embedded into a business as usual
Yeah.
environment, I would prefer to understand the background to the process, where it should sit based on earlier cases, so that inquiries are dealt with consistently and are fully documented for audit purposes. Please provide me with some understanding of how often this happens, root causes, potential solutions, impact branch customer, and whether there's any financial implication. Are you here asking about the process generally for whenever Fujitsu sought to make amendments to branch accounts?
Yes. I presume that this was that this issue itself, in this case, hadn't just come out the blue, that it wasn't the first time that it had ever happened. And even if it was the first time that it had ever happened, then surely somebody somewhere would have been able to give me some background and say, well, we can't give you any background on it other than this specific case. They would have been able to, I presume, give me some sort of root cause, as in their words, I got used to using. And somebody somewhere would have been able to give us an idea of whether or not there was any impact to the branch or the customer. So, because it could be that if it was a bill, did this say health lottery?
Health lottery,
right.
Yes.
In that case, then, had they got that health lottery ticket or whatever it was it a prize from the health lottery? I don't know. So were they still out of pocket, or was the branch being affected other than not being able to use that counter terminal, really?
Can we go to page 1, please, of this document?
I think there's probably a break in the transcription service.
Oh, sorry.
But as I say, provided the transcriber is transcribing, I think in the room we'll just have to put up with it.
Yeah, I'm told it's fine.
Fine, yeah, right.
Thank you. Here is an email you sent to Ian Humphreys. The second paragraph, you say, I'm therefore happy to authorise this session to be deleted so that the kit at the branch can return to BAU state. Earlier, when you saw the information you had, the transaction detail and what was being required, it's fair to say that you, in terms of the technical aspects of it, you didn't have a good grasp of that. Is that fair? Did you seek any IT input into whether that was an appropriate decision to, or appropriate action to take?
Well, the IT input then would have come from Atos. So from Ian or whoever was working on that side of it now in Atos. That's where it would have come from, and it would have been up to them to go to Fujitsu to get anything more that was needed. We didn't have, by that point, for day-to-day enquiries, we didn't have a direct route into Fujitsu, so it was all done through Atos.
Were you responsible for authorising these types of transactions in the future?
No, I think at that point, once we'd established that there was no impact to the branch financially or to the customer, that the customer was okay with everything, because there was no clear process and nobody was coming up with one, I think what we did was say, right, we'll authorise it because it was important for the branch to get the counter position back up and running. One, so that they had somewhere to serve customers from. If it was, I mean, heavens forbid, it wasn't just a one position branch, I don't think. But if it was a two position branch and they had busy periods, they would clearly need to have that second position up and running. So if that wasn't up and running correctly, it needed to be. Plus, they would have to reach a point where they would need to roll that position over properly, I think. So they would need to be back online to do that, so that information didn't get lost or fall into the wrong trading period or something like that, whatever could go wrong. So I think what we've done is say, right, we'll do this so that we can follow the whole thing through and then try and get a BAU process for this so that we know in future where it needs to go to get authorised.
Right, and that BAU process didn't result in you being the authoriser?
No.
So is your evidence then, until the Atos 2P transfer, there was some sort of process in place for authorising these types of remote access requests? There was then a period of time when there was no BAU process, but after this, some procedure was put into place, but you weren't involved with it?
Yes, that's assuming that there had been cases of this beforehand, and I still don't know that I ever got to the bottom of how many of these there was.
Right. Please can we bring up FUJ 000-85864? And page 7 of that document, please. Could we go to page 7 of that document, please? Thank you. So we have an email from Katie Austin to Kendra Dickinson and Ibrahim Kizildag. And this refers to what's now known as the Dell Mellington bug or the outreach bug. Is this a fair summary that an outreach service was where there was a core post office branch known as a core branch, and there may be a separate site, an outreach site, which would essentially operate as a satellite for that core post office?
Yeah, it may have more than one satellite site, if you like. But yes, that's essentially it.
And in order to operate those satellite sites, the core branch would rem out cash and stock to the outreach site.
Yes.
And in this case, what's being described here is a problem where someone would, in this case, rem out £8,000. So that would come out of the core site, so scan that out, go to scan it into the outreach site, but that was duplicated as it was duplicated several times, so that the outreach site was showing more cash than actually what went across. So in this case, £24,000 rather than 8,000.
Yes.
Now, if we go up, please. Oh, sorry, no, I'll leave it there for the second, sorry. We see at the bottom of that explanation that the incident was passed to Fujitsu, who have advised that in order to resolve the issue, the branch/MBSC must complete a rem out for the excess to correct the cash holding, which Fujitsu are unable to do. The MBSC has subsequently advised that they cannot assist as this is an IT issue. However, Fujitsu are also advising that they cannot assist. As a result, the issue has been passed back and forward for over a week. Obviously, this email is the 20th of October. The issue was raised on the 8th of October, some 12 days earlier. Do you consider it satisfactory for this issue to be bounced between the two teams for 12 days?
No.
And was this an issue that regularly happened where postmasters' complaints such as this fell between the cracks?
I wouldn't say regularly, no. And I don't know, I think this was possibly the first example of this kind of issue that I'd seen. So whether or not, if there'd been any previous ones, at that point I would be wondering what had happened to them beforehand, how, what the cause was, how quickly had they been fixed, what the process was to get it sorted out. 12 days, no, because if I'd been the sub-postmaster and I was looking at a discrepancy of £24,000, then I'd have been sweating for 12 days. When really, if it's a known problem or we can identify what the problem is, it should be easy enough to fix.
Is your evidence that this is the first system bug that you were aware of?
I don't know what you mean by system bug.
Or a bug in the software system, a bug in the software?
Well, possibly it was, yes. I mean, I don't know what the difference is between bugs, glitches and errors, for one. Things that went wrong, I suppose when things went wrong if a communication broke down, I'd seen those before where there would end up being a discrepancy, but they were always, you could correct them with fallback and recovery processes, so that there would be interruptions to the Horizon system like there is with your phone or anything else, if you like, except that with the Horizon system, obviously, if that was partway through a transaction, then it might freeze something and it would then have to be corrected. So I had seen that type of thing and heard of that type of thing happening before, but this is the first time that I'd seen it actually cause a shortage like that, where there was nothing that they could do about it, even under fallback and recovery.
We can take that document down then and move on to another issue in September 2015, so slightly before. Can we bring up POL 00002578? And page 4, please. Just for context, at the bottom is the email from Ibrahim Kizildag to the branch support team, about Fleckney Post Office, to which we see above you respond.
Right.
You can go down to that email from Ibrahim Kilzadag, please. Thank you. So I took a manager call from Fleckney Post Office. Branch code gives a branch code. This branch had a data center link error message yesterday evening, and PM couldn't log on to Horizon system this morning. PM said he had a message stated that they are logged onto another stock unit. They only have 2 positions and nobody is logged in. The PM feels that this is a security issue, and he has said someone could have logged on to their system, and he is not happy about this message. As PM also said he watched Panorama program, and he wants us to escalate this issue. I escalated this issue to service desk. If possible, can field teams visit this branch regarding this also? And your response is at 4. So the outcome of the call to Atos is needed before any further action is taken. It might explain what happened. Is there a ref number? Is the reference to Horus? Has the Horus user data been checked? And Keith, for info, this may be raised to you if you're still in contact with Fleckney. In brief, though the recent com statement should be used, and I've no doubt there will be an explanation here that's nothing to do with Horizon. So, again, on what basis did you have no doubt that there was a Horizon issue here?
Probably because I'd never ever come across one before. And at that point, I think we could get, you could get reports on who was logged onto Horizon through Horus. I don't know that we could actually get them anyway. I think there was a user report that you could get off your system, and I probably wrongly, without knowing all the information and looking at what the postmaster could see myself, assumed that they hadn't checked to see who was logged on where and when. So that's about as much as I can say on that.
In respect to the com statement, in relation to the Panorama documentary, please could we bring up WITN 06380102? If we could go to the bottom, please. Sorry, if you just up so we can see the date on the email. So it's communications team, 14th August 2015. Sorry, this is the below that. The from communications team, 14th August 2015 to communications team. In the loop, latest on Panorama. Go down. It says, hello, I wanted to send a short update on the plans by the BBC's Panorama to broadcast a programme about the post office and its Horizon system on Monday. We spent a great deal of the week dealing with this issue and making our position clear to the BBC at very senior levels. We do expect, however, that the programme will include a number of unsubstantiated allegations. We've decided against being interviewed as part of the programme and have instead issued a robust statement. This was a very carefully considered decision, but the programme wanted us to speak publicly about individual cases, and we are not prepared to break the confidentiality commitments we have given about these. Whilst it is difficult to take this position in the face of untrue claims being made in public, we believe it is the right one. The next paragraph down says, on Monday we'll be sending out a note to all post office colleagues updating them on the programme. In the meantime, our core points are below. I would welcome your help in ensuring that our key messages are cascaded to colleagues, particularly those who may get questions from customers or postmasters. And the key points are extremely serious, unsubstantiated allegations about the post office and the Horizon system have continued to be repeated over the past few years by a small number of mainly former postmasters. goes on below to say the clear evidence we have in these cases does not support the allegations made. We are committed to confidentially to people who put grievances to us, so we cannot share details about individual cases. What we can say is we do not prosecute people for making innocent mistakes and never have. We've demonstrated that Horizon works as it should. It's been shown to be robust and effective in dealing with 6 million transactions a day, with some 78,000 people using it, and it is regularly audited. We can leave that there, the rest is in evidence. Was this the messaging you were referring to in that email?
It will have been, yes.
And you were relying on that in respect of how you dealt with inquiries that came into you from Subpostmasters?
We would.
And that-
Everybody would have, not just myself, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Allaker. I don't have any further questions for now. Some of the core participants may do. Before I do, is there anything else you'd like to say to the inquiry?
No, there's not. Thanks.
Looks like Mr. Steen has a question.
Ms. Allaker, when Mr. Stevens started asking you questions today, he was asking you about your knowledge of the Subpostmaster's contract. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question about that. My name is Sam Steen, another Sam, and I represent a large number of Subpostmasters and mistresses. Okay, and Mr. Stevens referred you to a document which has a relativity reference of POL 50254. If it is possible, Lawrence, for that to go on the screen. And within that document, it's page 33 on relativity pagination. And this time, please, very top of the page, highlighting losses and paragraph 12. If you could expand that and highlight in yellow, I'd be very grateful. Thank you very much. So, generally speaking, this is the contractual term that was in place for Subpostmasters and mistresses throughout the time of the operation of the Horizon system. And it says the Subpostmaster is responsible for all losses caused through his own negligence, carelessness, or error. So that's the relevant bit that you were asked about earlier. Now, just to help us understand a little bit more about what you thought that meant. Now, meant in terms of who needed to prove negligence, carelessness, or error. So there are perhaps two choices. Did the post office need to prove that the Subpostmaster had been negligent, careless, or in error? Or was that for the postmaster or mistress to prove that they hadn't?
Probably a little bit of both, from my interpretation, because there was a lot of procedures that you were expected to follow from a security point of view. So there would be, if you were interviewing somebody, for example, to say, you know, how did this happen? What are your general procedures in branch? You would try and make sure that what they were doing was following all the necessary security guidelines, so that access to stock and cash was restricted, that things were locked away appropriately. So it was up to us to make sure that they knew what they were doing, and it was up to them to say, yes, that's what we have done. So I think, in a way, to answer your question, a little bit of both.
What if the situation was that the Subpostmaster couldn't explain? In other words, had no idea where the shortfall came from. Now, in that situation, they're not saying that they are careless, they're not saying they're negligent, they're not saying they're in error, they're just saying, I don't know. In that situation, who was it to prove that they had been careless, negligent, or in error?
In that case, in all honesty, I don't think you can prove it one way or another. Because if you've made a mistake, if something's happened accidentally, or even if someone's taken the money and you don't know anything about it, then in all honesty, you can't prove anything one way or another. So if you dropped the money into a post bag or the bin and it had been emptied and gone missing, you don't know that it's carelessness, negligence, or what's the last one? Error. So I don't think you can prove it one way or another.
In a situation whereby the sub-postmaster is saying, Ms. Allaker, I really don't know what's happened here, what would be the position from the post office? That would still be down to the postmaster or mistress to make good that loss?
Yes. Not necessarily all in one lump sum, depending on circumstances, but yes.
And that was the position that was known and operated throughout the team that you worked in, and indeed you worked within?
Yes.
Excuse me one moment. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much for making your witness statement and for coming to give evidence to the inquiry. I'm grateful to you.
Okay. Thank you.
So no doubt we'll have a short break while we call another witness, so to speak.
I think we need 20 minutes, sir, if
All right,
that's okay.
fine. 12:05.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Blake.
Thank you, sir. Can we call Gayle Peacock, please?
Repeat after me. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Take a seat.
Thank you very much. Can you give your full name, please?
Gayle Ann Peacock.
Thank you, Ms. Peacock. In front of you, you have two bundles, I believe, and
Yeah.
behind one of them, tab A, there is your witness statement. Could I ask you to turn to that witness statement, please?
Yeah.
Is that statement in front of you dated the 31st of January of this year?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Could I ask you to look at the final page, final substantive page, that's page 50. Yes, is that your signature at the bottom there?
Yes, that is.
Thank you. And is that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you very much. That witness statement is going to go into evidence and it will be published by the inquiry. For the purpose of the transcript, it's WITN 06160100. And the questions I'm going to ask you today are going to be supplementary to that, and we'll expand on a few areas. I am going to start, though, on your background, which you have detailed in the statement. You've been in quite a large number of different areas, a number of different roles. I'm going to focus on the ones that are relevant for today's purpose.
Okay.
You joined the post office in 2001 as part of a graduate management trainee scheme, is that right?
It's correct, yes.
And during that scheme, you used Horizon, I think, when you were seconded to Middlesbrough Post Office.
I did, yes.
You subsequently held a number of positions. I'm going to start with 2006 to 2010. You were the head of network coordination. Can you briefly tell us what that involved?
So there was two aspects to the role, really. One was around they'd set up the outlet intervention team in Maidstone. So this was the escalation point for Subpostmaster queries where they couldn't get the answer from Network Business Support Centre. Anything that couldn't be answered by the helpline, we had to set that team up to basically deal with those inquiries. So there was that part of the team that I managed. I also managed a team of network coordination managers, and they interacted mostly with the heads of area and their retail line managers to understand some of the issues that branches were facing, whether that be cash management, product and branch accounting, and try to sort of help postmasters, really.
And then between 2011 and 2013, you were Network Conformance Standards and Policy Manager. Can you tell us briefly what that involved?
Yeah, so that was, there was a branch standards booklet published, I think, in 2009, and this was basically running the team that would help branches understand how to follow the correct procedures. So I had a team of people that would make telephone interventions to branches and talk to them about the areas within the booklet. I also had a data team that would look at the results of the different areas that we would manage. They would plan the sort of the support roles, the intervention, the telephone calls. I had a mails support manager who worked for me, I think, at the time, and that was around managing some elements of the mails distribution agreements or some of the complex issues that we had with Royal Mail to resolve. And then I had a multiples service manager, and they were responsible for all of like the conformance elements with the likes of McCall's Co-op interfacing with those partner groups, really to drive performance in the areas that we were focusing on with post offices.
Thank you. 2013 to 2014, Head of Branch Support Project. Briefly, we'll go into it in more detail, but can you tell us what that involved?
So I was asked to lead the project on the back of the second site review and some of the issues that were coming, the thematic issues that were part of that review, to really understand what we could do to help postmasters, especially in the likes of training and support, and what we could do differently. So it was really about, you know, doing more of a deep dive into some of the themes that were coming out of those spot reviews and the individual cases, and then looking across the business to say, well, you know, how could we improve things? What would we need to put in place? That kind of thing, really.
And finally, between 2015 and 2018, you were Head of Branch and Customer Support.
Yeah.
Now, that was what was previously we know as the MBSC.
It was,
is that
yes.
right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you were involved in a number of matters in that role, but one of them included managing executive correspondence.
Yeah, so that was anybody, it was members of Parliament, public, postmasters who would write to it, the chief exec or any member of the post office executive team. So it was that team who would get those complaints and manage them basically in the business.
It sounds as though, in broad terms, a lot of your career has focused on support to sub-postmasters, whether it be providing that directly or reviewing the support that's provided to sub-postmasters. Is that a fair
that's
description?
correct, yes.
Are there any other roles that you've held that I have failed to mention that you think are relevant to this inquiry?
I don't think so. I mean, I did a retail line manager role where it was, you know, I was looking after a patch of branches myself in my early part of my career, but I guess that's probably not really relevant to the themes out of the Horizon inquiry as such.
Thank you. The first topic I'd like to talk to you about today is the training of sub-postmasters, managers and assistants. We've heard earlier in this phase about the training that was provided at rollout and that it was only a day and a half. By 2006, in broad terms, what kind of a training package was offered to sub-postmasters?
It was a colleague in network services, and I think it was split at the time. There was Andy Bayfield and Julia Marwood who managed the team. So I think in terms of the broad level detail, I think at 2006, I think it was about a week's classroom course that they were offered, a transfer balance, which was obviously the incoming and the outgoing postmaster, and then depending on the size of the branch, there could be like 5 days face-to-face support in branch, and then I think there was a follow-up balance, so the next time that the branch needed to do their cash account or branch trading, they would attend. And then I think I believe there was what we call post-transfer visits, so I think it was 1, 3 and 6 months. I think that was what was on offer at the time.
Thank you. So the amount of training certainly had increased since rollout. You say in your statement that the overall training to postmasters needed to be improved. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think generally it was the difficulty that you got with a network that size is the volume of postmasters and the one size fits all. So you've got your challenge of of geography. You had people who couldn't attend the classroom course for whatever reason. You know, post office didn't pay for a postmaster to actually come and attend them. Sometimes the timing wasn't convenient of the training, and then you obviously had the different product mix as well. And then sometimes there would be challenges potentially if you went into a branch and the postmaster wasn't present, or you would train staff. So, and the other thing is you could be giving training to a postmaster, but you would only cover the things that were available during that 5 days. So if a transaction wasn't there, for example, because it didn't happen very often, it wasn't covered because you didn't have the opportunity to do it, because you might teach the theory but not the actual practice. So yeah, I think one of the challenges, I don't think we understood the effectiveness of the training. You know, it was like that was what you got and that was it. You know, I don't think there was any kind of training needs assessment with postmasters to go, do you learn by computers? Are you practical? You know, there just wasn't the opportunity for that flexibility. There was no online learning packages at that time either. You know, it was literally face-to-face or classroom, and that was it. So it probably fell down in a number of ways.
Can you assist us with the difference in training that was provided to post office employees versus sub-postmasters?
I think that was managed by central HR teams. When I joined, I got a two-week counter-training classroom course that I attended, and then obviously that was followed up in branch. I don't think there was any kind of formal induction programme for post office employees. When you mean employees, you mean like direct managed staff, or do you mean like the likes of the corporate staff like myself?
I think somewhere in your statement you say effectively that the training that was provided to employees was better than that to sub-postmasters. The quality in training was better.
Can you point me to where you
It's not a
interpreted that?
significant point. It's not a significant, if you don't agree with it, then that's absolutely fine as well.
Yeah, I probably disagree with it actually, because I think it was, you know, I think one of the observations is that sometimes, you know, post office employees or colleagues didn't understand what it was like to be in a branch network because they weren't exposed to the Horizon terminal, you know, the likes that I had. So it was quite inconsistent and hit and miss. So yeah, that's not the message that I wanted to convey in the statement, if that's what you're implying.
You do say in your statement that if there was space, managers and assistants could
Yeah.
attend. Are you aware of there not being space in certain circumstances?
I can't recall any. I think it was about 6 to 8 places potentially available. I don't know if anybody was tracking, you know, what the take-up was.
In 2006, you were head of network coordination, and we've
Yeah.
spoken about that. There was a business reorganization in 2006.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that affected the issues that we're discussing today? So in terms of the offices, you said that there were area offices prior to that.
Yeah, so in 2006, I think it was McKinsey's that did a big, it was a full business restructure, and everybody, I think bar a very small portion of colleagues, went through what we call a preference exercise. So they were asked to, you know, did you want a job with the business? Did you want to take redundancy or whatever? So everybody was asked. And then one of the big changes that they made in 2006 was, prior to that time, regardless of what size branch you were, where you were located or whatever, you had an area manager tagged to you. And there was a sales and service structure immediately prior to that 2006. So one of the big changes of the 2006 restructure was the decision was made that a large portion of the network wouldn't actually have an area manager tagged to them as a branch, and that any inquiry that they had would be tagged to the Network Business Support Centre. So I think it was about 2,000 branches that were given, like, in effect, it was a sales type manager. So they weren't really supposed to do what we would call like the service elements or the transactional queries, that kind of thing. and then literally everybody else that was the decision that was made, was you would be directed to the Network Business Support Centre. There was 11, I think there was about 11 area offices as part of that sales and service structure that was closed, so they all closed and it was left with Maidstone. So one of the jobs that I was tasked with doing with someone in my team was closing all of those area offices, which included things like branch files. We had to relocate them to Leeds, and then obviously all of those members of staff, they went and everything was closed, and it literally left Maidstone.
So prior to that reorganisation, if there was a service problem, you would have somebody who could physically attend
Yes.
the branch.
Yeah, so there was a series of, I think, either area intervention managers or area performance managers. I can't remember the exact structure because I didn't work in it, but I knew obviously colleagues who did. Yeah, they would manage all of the what we'd call the non-sales issues, so things like problems balancing, losses, robbery, burglary, relocations, anything like that. Then it would be directed to the regional teams, and they would then have a plan for how to support the postmasters within their region.
And how did the change impact on that? Say you had a problem with balancing, was that no longer available?
So there wasn't necessarily a person to go to. So the route, one of the things that we had to do when we set up the team in Maidstone was actually understand what all of the processes were that were affected, and then decide who was left in the business to pick that piece up, and then sort of almost redesign that process. If the Network Business Support Centre couldn't deal with it, then that's when it came into the outlet intervention team in Maidstone, which I managed, and then we would work with the relevant teams to try and sort something out. So with a balancing inquiry, if they couldn't resolve it, you know, we would do our own investigation in terms of going through the possibilities that it could be. We would possibly liaise with product and branch accounting to see if there's any other information that could be available. And worst case scenario, we would send somebody out from what we'd call the field team, so a trainer or an auditor, to see what could actually be done to help the postmaster.
And when was that? Was that 2006? Or
That was
later?
2006.
Paragraph 66 of your statement, you say that replacing physical support with remote intervention was not enough for some sub-postmasters.
I don't think it was. You know, it assumed that everybody could cope and everyone was at the same level of, you know, competence, I guess, or, you know, even if you had a new postmaster, possibly the ones that had been there quite some time were probably okay because they knew how to do things. I don't think the business knew how people would be affected and didn't tailor that support accordingly. It was just assumed that everybody could just manage on their own.
Do you know what the driver was behind the reorganisation?
I wasn't party to those conversations. I'm making the assumption it was probably cost. You know, there was a big drive that we had to get back to profit. As an organisation, the sort of government income from pensions allowances, the branches were migrating onto card account. You know, in terms of the income that was available to postmasters and post office, it was just what I think it was a cost commercial decision to do that. They couldn't see the commercial return on having a physical body going out to a branch and supporting them. They couldn't translate that into a monetised value.
I think you mentioned that there were 2,000 or so branches which had a different level of service. Yeah. Were those the more commercial branches?
Yeah, so the bigger branches, you know, the ones that might have the potential to, because at that time there was the sort of the drive to increase, you know, the financial services. So we were moving, you know, into car insurance, home insurance, all of those kinds of things, and it was felt that actually that those branches had the right demographic, they had the right footfall, they were bigger in remuneration, and therefore they deserved more support than the smaller ones.
You've said that introducing the pre-2006 position, or reintroducing that, was not a commercially viable option. Can you expand on that?
So I think I mean, the background to the branch standards booklet was, I think, you know, in about 2007, they were starting to sort of feel some of the consequences of not having that, you know, immediate support for the branch. And I think, you know, it was just too expensive to reintroduce a physical presence. And I think the preferred option was see what you can do remotely from an outbound perspective before you then start introducing area managers back in. I don't think that was an option for us to consider.
And I think you also said in your statement that resourcing over the phone support was the best given the financial circumstances. Yes. Do you know who within the company was driving this move?
I think it was just that it was a top-down, you know, it was at board level, you know, so I think one of the strategies, I think it was the forward 5 to 11 that was launched on the back of, there was the big business restructure. It was, you know, back to profit was the 2006 forward 5 to 11 strategic, you know, you did the forward 5 to 11, then the 4 to 11, then the 3 to 11. So it was very much front and centre driven from the top that actually that was the business strategy that Post Office was going to deploy.
And you said that there was no central system to understand who had visited which branches, and that some had never been visited or may never have been visited. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Did that change, or is there now a central system?
Yeah, so I think over time it definitely did. One of the criticisms is obviously the second site report was obviously there was no central point for recording contact. One of the things that I was involved in 2017 was the introduction of Microsoft Dynamics CRM solution, which recorded who was making outbound or receiving inbound interventions from branches. So that was rolled across like 25 different teams across product and branch accounting, MBSC, security, a number of different back office teams, HR, so we could at least track who was having a conversation with who about what. They then made that into I think the branch information tool, which was made available to area managers so they could at least understand what their branches were, what conversations they were having with certain branches. I don't think they ever got to the position of like physically tracking who was going in, and you know, like you could have a security manager visit one day and an area manager the next. I don't think they ever implemented that. They may have done since I've left. I'm not sure.
You've said at paragraph 25 of your statement, and I think you've repeated it in your evidence today, that postmasters could request further support from the MBSC, and that's from the 2006 reorganisation. Mm-hmm. Were you aware that in 2010 the Post Office was going to start charging for visits to the branch?
Yes, it was. So that was part of the branch standards change that I was involved in implementing. So it was a contractual change with the postmasters, and I think there was a charge specifically related to cash holdings. So this was where if a postmaster failed to regularly declare the cash in branch correctly, and despite any sort of help, intervention and support, repeatedly needed to do it, and then somebody had to go out, there was the mechanism in the contract to charge for it if it was deemed appropriate to charge for it. I think the other one in there was the regulatory compliance training. So the post offices had to do, I think it was about 12 modules every year, and there were a handful of branches that repeatedly failed to do that training despite phone calls, help. So it was seen as sort of like a last resort for a minority of branches. I can't remember the volume that were involved, but we would possibly a handful every now and again that were subject to this, to the charge. But given the volume of telephone interventions, the compliance training generated usually about 1,000 calls every month to branches to remind them to do it, and then you might potentially be left with 2 or 3 who just may have refused or didn't do it for whatever reason. In that instance, the postmaster would have been advised beforehand that, you know, you've got the option to do it. If we need to send somebody out, there is the option that we can charge it. And I think there was a cap on the charge as well, that it would only be up to a certain amount of money. It was intended to cover the cost of the person that would go out to help.
Can you tell us briefly what was branch standards? It's a booklet or
Yeah, so it was
something else?
So the branch, well, it was a booklet in the team. So the branch standards was there to define what the business as a whole deemed to be the important sort of standards that a branch should follow. So there was the booklet and the communication, and then there was my team, the branch standards team, that would we used to send out the scorecard to branches every month to say this is how your performance, how you're doing against the standards, and then we would make the relevant support interventions as well to branches who we felt needed some help understanding what some of those procedures were.
Thanks. I'm going to take you to a document. Can we look at poll 00084464? So you'll be familiar with this document.
Yes.
It says, "Dear colleague, I'm pleased to send you the Post Office Branch Standards booklet." So this document and the booklet would go to the Post Office branches.
Yeah, so there was a covering letter, there was a copy of the booklet. Because it was a contractual change, they would have received a copy of the contractual amendment as well. Yeah, it would have been part of a pack.
Can we scroll down on this page to the paragraph that says starting in June 2010? Thank you. It says, starting in June 2010, we'll pass on to you the cost of any visits to your branch to ensure that compliance training has been completed. We'll also pass on the cost of any further training if you're not carrying out your overnight cash or ATM declarations properly, including the cost of visiting your branch to deliver the training. We will also pass on to you the charges we have to pay for missing motor vehicle licence discs. The details of how these measures could affect you are shown in conformance with branch standards booklet included with this letter. Do you think at this time there was a hardening of attitudes towards sub-postmasters in trying to charge them for services that had previously not been charged for example?
I'm not sure really. I think there was probably some discussions around what else we could do. So you would like try and help branches as much as you can, but sometimes you were just left with a group that just for whatever reason didn't do what everybody else wanted to do. So I think it was almost, well, would this sort of act as a motivation? If people thought financially they might be impacted by it, would it make any difference? I'm not sure generally whether a hardening attitude towards postmasters, I don't think.
I mean, let's say if a sub-postmaster had a shortfall they couldn't explain, we've heard that they'd have to pay for the shortfall.
Yeah.
But now would they also have to pay for additional support if somebody was required to come and visit them? Would they have to pay?
If you wanted to enforce the contract, then yes.
We've heard also from some witnesses that the training that had been provided to sub-postmasters contained some gaps when it came to things like balancing.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah.
And if you needed more training to cover that, would you have to pay for that? Would that require a visit that you would have to pay for potentially?
No, you wouldn't have to pay for those ones.
No. Are you aware at this time of continued financial difficulties within the Post Office? So 2010, we spoke about 2006 and the reorganisation.
So do you mean postmasters or post
No,
office?
the company, Post Office.
In what? In what respect? I think.
Were there financial pressures still? You spoke about them in 2006. Did those continue in 2010?
So I think there was always a focus on cost with Post Office. You know, throughout the whole of my career, there was always the emphasis to do things more efficiently. You know, it's a government-funded organisation. It was reduce the burden on the taxpayer. What could you do? And it was constantly in the culture that what could you do to reduce cost? That was just, you know, that was just part of what it was. Every year when we had teams, the budget got reduced, and you would have to find a way to manage that. You know, we had numerous reorgs, and most of that was driven of what could you do better, what could you stop doing, what could you reduce. So I think the focus on cost, because, you know, it was a commercial organisation that was paid for by the taxpayer. You know, there was that constant need to actually just keep, you know, reduce it.
Can we look at poll 000847769? So this is the branch standards document.
Yep.
Is that what would have been attached to that document that we
Yes,
just
it was
saw?
a small A5 booklet. Yep.
Thank you. If we turn over the page, you have an introduction. And that introduction is from Paula Vanels, the network director at that
Yes.
stage. Was she responsible, or was she the driving force behind this branch standards document and the change in approach?
Yeah, so this was the initiative. So, you know, the branch standards was part of the network efficiency programme that was set up. That was ultimately sponsored by Paula. I worked to Lynn Hobbs. Lynn Hobbs worked to Paula, and that was, you know, this was the direction that was given. It was, we need to try and find a coordinated approach of enforcing standards within the network. So, yeah, Paula was completely aware of what we were doing. She would have had to have signed off this opening introduction as well.
Yes. So it was enforcing standards, but it was also at the same time trying to meet the cost pressures that
Yes.
the Post Office was under.
Yeah.
Can we look at page 15, please? Thank you. There's a section there on processing transactions correctly on the right-hand side, and I'll read it. It says, rectifying mistakes is a significant cost to the Post Office. Whilst we understand that mistakes will happen on occasion, we want to minimise them to reduce our costs and give good customer service. Getting transactions right means we don't have to waste time resolving mistakes. It also gives our partners confidence that we can transact their products in the correct way. And there are suggestions there for getting it right every time. Make sure that you and your teams follow the correct procedures for each transaction. This will increase confidence and help prevent transaction errors and corrections. If you receive a transaction correction to rectify a mistake, deal with it as soon as possible and always within the balanced trading period. If a transaction correction has a monetary value, any discrepancies must be dealt with promptly by contacting product and branch accounting. At this period in time, was there a particular focus on mistakes being the fault of the sub-postmaster, or certainly a belief that the mistakes that were occurring were the fault of the sub-postmaster?
I think there was a focus on cost. So the view was, you know, you've got people in product and branch accounting in Chesterfield who are literally there because they're sending things backwards and forwards to clients because something has happened in branch. I think there was that. I think there was also an awareness that some of our transactions weren't as easy to follow as they could have been.
Were sub-postmasters seen as the cause of some unnecessary costs that were impacting the Post Office?
I think probably some were, but then I think also there was the view that some transactions were potentially difficult. I think it was probably a combination.
What do you mean by difficult?
So, you know, throughout the some of the evidence, obviously things like scratch cards, reversals, that kind of thing. I think, you know, a lot of the information within the bundle sort of alludes to the fact that some of this stuff wasn't as easy as it could have been in terms of a product process.
And how is this assisting telling sub-postmasters to just get it right, to follow the correct procedures?
I mean, in hindsight, it's probably not, is it?
I'm going to move on to another document that I think accompanied this, the branch standards. Let's look at poll 000847774. Thank you. I'm just going to read to you that first paragraph, or some of the first paragraph. It says, can you just tell us briefly, though, this was a document that went alongside, or was
Yes,
to be read alongside?
It would have been like Q&A's gone out with it, yeah.
Thank you. What type of consequences will there be for not complying with branch standards, including selected standards? There will be specific financial consequences for sub-postmasters who do not meet the expected level of performance for some branch standards. The amendment to the sub-postmasters contract, which introduces the financial consequences, is also included with the information that will be sent with the booklet. Again, my reading is that there's a hardening towards the sub-postmasters of attitude. Is that wrong?
I don't really, I can't really sort of give an opinion on that. What from 2006 to 2010, or from a specific time period? In
2010, you have these branch standards, and sub-postmasters are being threatened with specific financial consequences. Okay. Do you agree that it has that kind of a tone about it, or not?
It does have a tone about it. I don't know whether that changed significantly from 2006 or there was a step change. I'm not sure.
I mean, we see there, for example, the fourth bullet point: if branches fail to complete cash declarations, including those relating to ATMs, and performance doesn't improve following remote intervention, a member of the network support field team will visit the branch to conduct further training, which will be at the cost of the sub-postmaster. Scrolling down, the existing contractual consequences for poor application of branch standards remain. This includes the possibility of action being taken under the sub-postmaster contract. This could be corrective action with the possibility of contract termination and or removal of a product from the branch. If a sub-postmaster has a query relating to specific areas of their contract, then this query should be raised with the Human Resources Service Centre. Certain breaches of branch standards which involve regulatory bodies may instigate criminal proceedings. In this question and answer document, is there, for example, any mention of how a sub-postmaster might dispute a transaction correction?
Within this one or in the branch standards one? I can't recall, to be honest, Julian.
How about disputing discrepancy in their figures in their branch trading statement? Were those kinds of things addressed in either the branch standards document or the accompanying Q&A?
I don't think so. I think there was an agent support charter. I can't remember the time of when that came out. I don't know if that was before or after the branch standards booklet, and that was around the service level agreements that Post Office would provide to postmasters. I think that covered it, but I can't remember when that was produced.
Okay. Just while we're on this document, if we scroll down to page 3, it's the final page. Will new sub-postmasters be subject to the same standards and consequences? Regardless of how long someone has been a sub-postmaster, we expect them to achieve the branch standards. the final sentence there. Also, any branch losses will be the responsibility of the sub-postmaster from the day of taking over the branch. Was it assumed that during this period that if there were losses, they were caused by user error rather than any fault with the Horizon system?
Yeah, I think that was just a widespread post office assumption, that it was due to what they would call branch non-conformance or user error.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to move on to a different topic, and that's suspension and appeals. You've explained that at one point you attended audits. I think you were shadowing or something
Yes.
along those lines. Can you briefly tell us in what capacity that was in?
So it was just as a learning exercise, so just to find out what actually happened, what it would involve. So I just attended the branch audit to actually see what happened.
Did you come across any auditors who were not acting professionally?
No, not in my experience.
Are you subsequently aware of any unprofessional conduct by auditors?
I can't remember specific examples, but I think obviously there were some concerns raised, as part of the inquiry. But I can't remember the specific ones. I didn't have any raised individually to me.
When you say inquiry, do you mean this inquiry
This
or the
inquiry,
second?
yes, this
thank
inquiry.
you. And were you involved in appeals against termination?
I was, yes.
And what role were you?
So I was the appeals manager.
And can you tell us how those took place? What format they were?
So there was a group of people who were selected to be appeals manager. I was one of those. The contracts manager would manage the contractual proceedings of processes with the postmaster. They would make a decision in terms of whether the contract needed to be terminated on what grounds relating to the specific part of the contract. The postmaster was then given the opportunity to appeal that decision, and then I think they submitted their request to the HR service centre, and then there would be just an appeal manager allocated to that particular case, and I was one of those managers that was selected if a postmaster wanted to actually appeal. I would then receive the appeal papers relating to that case, so that would be a bundle from the contracts advisor or contracts manager who'd dealt with that case, any information that was relevant to how that decision had made, any kind of meeting notes, that kind of thing. I would then contact the postmaster and arrange to meet them, and they'd have the opportunity to sort of like have that discussion with me, present any new evidence. I'd review the case in terms of what was the evidence provided, was the decision appropriate, had the case been handled correctly, and then ultimately make the decision around whether it was appropriate to terminate that postmaster's contract.
What period of time are we talking now?
So that would have been from, I think you could only do it when you were classed as a senior manager, so I think it was from 2006 onwards. I think my last postmaster appeal probably would have been in about 2018. There was a period where I didn't do them because there was a decision made. I can't remember what time scale it was, but there was as part of one of the business reorganisations, there was a dedicated appeals manager that, rather than try and farm them out to individual senior managers across the business, there was a gentleman called Andy Bayfield who managed or who heard all of the appeals regardless of geography. And then I think Andy left in about 2010, and then it reverted back to individuals across the business.
I think you've said in your witness statement that the majority of cases there was a financial discrepancy that had occurred that was a contributing factor.
Yes.
Were sub-postmasters represented at these appeals?
Yeah, so they had the opportunity. So part of the appeals process is they could bring a friend or a colleague or a member of the National Federation of Subpostmasters. I think everyone bar one that I ever did was always with two people.
Not legal representatives, though.
No.
What was your understanding of how easy it was to obtain what we know as ARQ files?
So these are the files from Fujitsu. So my understanding was that Post Office as an organisation were allowed so many ARQ files sort of per year. I think the number was about 300 or 400 or whatever. That was managed by the security investigations team. I think if you needed access to one for whatever reason, you could request it through the security investigations team. I don't think they were made available as a matter of course, for each suspension case.
I think you've mentioned in your statement a few different types of logs. You've talked about transaction logs, keystroke logs, and ARQ logs. Do you know the difference between them?
So I think the ARQ was almost the keystroke log, so that would record everything in terms of what the user in branch had, allegedly pressed. The transaction log was the log that would be generated from Horizon. So I think anybody with manager access, and it was, it didn't have everything. So it was like the transaction stamp of the day. You could run a particular time period. So if you had a discrepancy, that you could move the transaction log and then you could print one in branch. So the transaction log was actually in branch. The ARQ and the keystroke stuff was the bits that were provided by Fujitsu.
And for the ARQ and the keystroke, would you have to go through the security
Yes,
team,
you
or was
would,
that
yes.
something? Yes.
You would.
And can you describe the difficulties in obtaining that information?
I never experienced any. I can't remember instances where I would. I didn't know of anybody who'd been refused, obviously, until I read the additional bundles that you sent through for the inquiry.
As part of the appeals process, though, are you aware of ARQ data being requested, being used in the appeal?
I would have used if it was part of the bundle of papers. If, depending on what the postmaster had said at the appeals interview, if I felt that I needed access to that information, I could make that request. I think it would depend on the timescale involved as well and whether it was still available. But I knew who to go to if I needed one. I couldn't answer for the other appeals managers. I don't know if they knew that they could get one. I knew I could get one, but I didn't know if they could.
And who would you get it from?
So it would have been, well, whoever was running the security investigations team. So there was a number of people that I would have known to make contact, head of security, whoever was fulfilling that role at the time.
And who prepared the appeals bundle for you?
It usually got sent by the contracts manager, so they would be. It would be bundled up as a file. I think you could get a hard copy file as well. So there was an admin team in Leeds who would post whatever hard copy information you needed to your house, or there was an electronic copy as well.
If the basis of the termination was a financial discrepancy, would ARQ data be provided ordinarily, or is that?
I don't think it was a standard process. I don't think it was something that, like, as part of a checklist that you would do. I don't think it was. I don't think it was something that was always included.
Was it sometimes included, rarely included, often included?
Sometimes, I think, from recollection.
Do you recall any sub-postmasters wanting additional data and not being able to receive it?
I can't recall anybody saying to me that they didn't get it. 'Cause part of, what I used to do was, print everything off and send it to them that I was going to consider that in advance of that meeting, so that they could see it, so that we could discuss it, and then should anything come across as part of that meeting that you might want to go and look at. So whether you needed access to any remittance slips or anything like that. If there was any information that came subsequently, the postmaster would get hold of it. I think the challenge was if they didn't know what they could have, would they know to ask necessarily?
And do you recall there being information provided to sub-postmasters about the availability of that kind of data?
No.
Briefly before, so I'm always woefully optimistic as usual. So we will certainly go over after lunch.
We'll take a normal lunch.
We'll take a normal lunch break, but I'll just ask you a few questions before we break for lunch. And that relates to Horus. We heard a little bit about that this morning. I think that stood for Horizon Information Centre, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And when was Horus introduced?
So that would have been part of the branch support programme. So that was, I think it was towards the tail end of 2014. I went on maternity leave in October 2014, and I think it was just starting to be, we were getting towards the end of that particular project, so it'd been not long after that.
And how did that differ to what was available before?
So the main difference with Horus, so if a postmaster rang up and said they had problems balancing, or they didn't know what had gone wrong, or X, Y, and Z, it was really difficult for anybody at the end of that phone to actually understand what had been pressed. It was almost like the advisor was working blind, and it relied on the postmaster relaying that information. What Horus enabled a certain number of users to do was it was in essence the ARQ data within, like, I think it was like a 15-minute window. So by making that available, you could actually understand if the postmaster had served in the wrong stock unit or logged off or not done like a fallback and recovery process correctly. You more post office users had access to, in effect, what was the ARQ data, and could see and try and use that data to help try and work out what had happened in that branch to try and rectify any errors or mistakes.
So that information was available to the sub-postmaster or assistant?
We would provide it if it was requested. Horus was the system that was used internally, so it was a license-based system that I think it started off small. So there was identified users within the Network Business Support Centre, cash management, product and branch accounting, and the security investigations team as well.
Did you still have to go through the security team to obtain the information?
No, as I say, it was about widening that up with a limited number of users, but in like a controlled environment, because obviously there was sensitive and information in there, so you had to understand who was using it and for what purpose. But there wasn't, if a postmaster saw, for example, when they contacted the Network Business Support Centre and the person helping them, because it was usually like a tier 2 type person, because you'd have to like go away, look at it, and then get back to the branch. There was no issue in providing that postmaster with a copy of that, because that's what you'd based your conclusion on, really.
Do you know what triggered the change to Horus?
So my recollection was, so I got called to a meeting by Fujitsu. I think there was Tony Jamaz from service management. So it was myself and Allaker, and we went to Bracknell. We got invited to a meeting with Fujitsu, where they actually showed us a demonstration of Horus. Myself and Anne were involved in the branch support programme at the time, and it was positioned to us as, what benefit would this bring the post office if you had access to this system? I think it was based on what they were using to track whether like terminals were down and that kind of stuff. So as part of that exercise, I went back and sort of talked to various people within the business, like Angela van den Bogaard, and we looked at, well, what benefit would this give? And then we obviously just implemented the project that then deployed it, because it was felt that actually it could provide some real help and try and resolve some issues and, you know, reduce this reliance on the ARQ, but also give postmasters a quicker resolution time in terms of somebody being able to see the data rather than it just being in a closed shop.
When it was presented to you by Fujitsu, had they expressed any concerns or frustrations relating to the provision of ARQ data?
Not that I'm aware of, not as part of that meeting.
And were you aware of any concerns within the post office about the difficulties in obtaining ARQ data?
I think the main concern that I was aware of was the cost if you wanted the additional stuff over the quarter. I don't know whether it was necessarily an issue of not getting hold of the data. I think sometimes there was a question of who would pay for it if it was needed, because it didn't fit within what you were allowed.
Okay. Thank you very much. So that's an appropriate time.
While it's on our mind, can I just ask one or two more questions about the appeal process?
Yeah.
Apart from the time when Mr. Bayfield sort of took over all the appeals, you said you were part of a group doing them.
Yeah.
Approximately how many of you?
I think there's about 15, 20
Right.
people.
So in any given year, let's put
Yeah.
it in that way to start with, how many do you think you personally would do?
I
on
think it was
average?
about 3 or 4.
3 or
would
4
get.
a year.
Yeah.
Right, fine. So, as a guesstimate, in the period between 2006, 2018, taking out Mr. Bayfield's time, overall 20, 30 appeals, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that probably seems about right.
Right. And just don't be too legalistic about this, but your decision, were you reviewing what the contracts manager had done, or were you actually looking at it all afresh and coming to your own decision?
I think you were supposed to do the former. I tended to do the latter.
Right. Well, that's not entirely surprising, but so there was a kind of process which told you what you should do,
Yeah.
so that it was a review. I'll call it a review, but you being you decided to look into it for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay. And how often did the appeal succeed? Roughly.
Not very often. I
Right.
never overturned one once.
Right. Well, that's fine. There is one other short point that's just eluding me for the moment. Yeah. Were the appeals in the main made when someone had had their contract terminated, or were there appeals about other things as well?
It was the contract ones was usually about, like, a formal appeal would be when the contract was terminated.
Yeah.
You would get sort of individuals where a decision had been made that, like a transaction correction or something, and there was you might get asked to review a decision.
But of the approximately 30 appeals that you dealt with, were they the vast majority where a contract had been terminated?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. Thanks very much. Okay, 2 o'clock?
Thank you.
Good.